Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Whiskey Uncorked, where, you guessed it, we're going to be continuing our 18-year-old single malt exploration series by taking a look at Talisker 18, which is a bottle that has ruffled some feathers in recent years, and there's a lot to talk about this, so why don't we jump right into it. Alright, so let's talk about the controversial aspect to this bottle, outside of it just being a Diageo release and a number of other things. But primarily what we're talking about here is, once again, price. The controversy goes back to 2022, where Diageo, the owners of Talisker, amongst many, many other Scotch distilleries, decided that they needed to increase the price of Talisker, which is nothing new. We've been talking about that a lot. However, this wasn't a gradual increase. This wasn't a 15 or 20% increase. This literally increased from around 75 pounds all the way up to 175 pounds, literally overnight. So currently on the Whiskey Exchange, this is listed at 190 pounds, so it's gone up even more from there. Direct translation is somewhere in that $230 to $240 range, and that would include tax. And just before we get too much into it, I'll just say that right now, this is a little bit all over the place in the US. Primarily, it looks like it's ranging from about $180 to $200, although there is a website that I've ordered from before, so I know that they're at least legit. They are offering this for $155, which is a pretty good deal at this point if you haven't gotten one yet. I myself paid $150 for this last year. This was after the price increases. I saw it on the shelf for $150 and did the classic thing where, you know what, this is the cheapest I'm ever going to get this bottle, so if I'm going to buy one, I should buy it now. Understandably, if you were a huge fan of this whiskey, which there were many, many of them out there, it more than doubling in price, going from 75 pounds to 175 pounds, thereabouts. Those numbers are approximate. But that's got to be a major blow to a lot of people who, there's a lot more people that can afford a 75-pound bottle of whiskey at least once in a while, and versus never being able to really justify or straight out afford a bottle that costs 175 pounds. This all led to a lot of people obviously going to the internet, making videos, being really upset about this. A lot of people just saying, I'm done with Talisker, I'm done with Diageo. Around the same time as this, there were increases to Lagavulin 16, another fan favorite, as Mortlach 16 went up. Basically, all of Diageo's kind of flagship whiskeys that were, at least of a somewhat higher age statement, really started to increase in price. There was a significant climb upwards, and Talisker was the leader of that clubhouse in terms of how much it increased. The general opinion or the consensus amongst some of the other content creators out there was that this was an attempt of Diageo to premiumize their brands, particularly Talisker, moving their bottles much more closely aligned with whiskeys such as Dalmore and Macallan. They increased the price, not quite up to their level yet, but they definitely took a big leap forward towards them. There's other possibilities here. One thing that I've always, at least personally, wondered, particularly with these distilleries really saying that this older stock is really starting to have a lot of pressure put on it in terms of its availability. They maybe didn't really manage that well. They were putting it into younger age-stated bottles at one point, so they've kind of hit this this area where there's a lot more people buying older age-stated Scotch, and they just don't have enough to keep it on the shelf if it's affordable. So rather than just it never be on the shelf, and particularly a brand like Diageo or a company like Diageo, who have brands like Talisker and Kleinlich and as I mentioned, like Lagavulin and all of these like very, very famous distilleries, instead of letting their shelf space either go to another company or just be sitting there empty, they raised the price to a point where it's not going to be flying off of shelves and it's going to be guaranteed to kind of stick there. And if you want to buy it at that price, that's up to you. Now, I don't know which one of those things it is. It could be something else. I have no idea. But generally speaking, most people assume that it's this premiumization of just the Scotch whiskey market in general. And Diageo has been one of the worst known culprits, which is really unfortunate because they have such a stable of amazing distilleries, or at least distilleries that are capable of being amazing. All right, so with that out of the way, I have a little bit of a disclaimer before I get into the tasting notes. I have a little bit of an up and down personal history with Talisker. There have been times where I've really liked Talisker in general, and there have been times when it wasn't really clicking for me. I will say that I am still somewhat in the boat of at least the 18-year-old and the 10, not really clicking. So if you are an absolute Talisker fanatic, you love Talisker, and you don't want to hear anybody say anything even remotely negative about it, I guess save yourself the frustration, and I'll see you next week. But yeah, let's talk about it. I'll try my best to kind of describe what it is that I feel like I'm not really connecting with, and yeah, where I'm going to go from here in regards to Talisker. All right, so let's talk about the bottle really quickly. There's not a ton to say. This is a combination of different casks. There's some bourbon, there's some sherry in here, I believe. It is coming at 45.8% ABV. It is chill filtered, and it does contain artificial coloring. All right, so with that, without any further ado, let's get into our nosing and tasting notes and give this one a score. So I can tell you right off the bat that it doesn't seem like the other tasting notes and things that I've seen other people give for this, that I really get all of it. I get some of it. Some of it makes a little bit of sense to me. But for, like I said, for whatever reason, the pieces of this puzzle just don't seem to fit together. So I'm going to do my best. If you think I'm completely wrong and that you're having a completely different experience, I get it. This is a bit of a conundrum for me, but I'm going to do my best. That's all I can do, is tell you what I'm experiencing. All right, so on the nose, again, it's a fairly elegant nose, especially for this being peated. The peat on the 18 is pretty clean. It's I actually do have a little pour of the 10-year-old. I'll do a little bit of a comparison at the end, so I'm already in my brain trying to do that, but I'll try to stick to just the 18 for the time being. But yeah, the peat is clean and it's pretty light. It's there, but it's a very kind of light campfirey smokiness. This is smoky, not quite obviously to Isla standards or anything like that, but it's not just one of these earthy, peaty drams either. There is some smoke here. There's a mix of some vanillas and some caramels. There's a gentle oakiness even to the nose. It's a little bit of toastiness. There's not quite roasted like I got on the Bunnahabhain 18, but there's a toastiness to this for sure. Fruit-wise, maybe some apples. Maybe, like, again, with the smokiness and whatnot, it kind of gives off that impression of some grilled apples, grilled pears, things like that. But we're not talking super dense, rich red fruits. The sherry on this is fairly subdued. It's integrated. This is not a sherry bomb by any stretch of the imagination. Though I will say that there's probably just a touch of nuttiness in this, and that's probably the greatest indicator, to me at least. All right, so I don't know if there's too much else to say. Generally speaking, I like the nose. It's nice. There's nothing wrong with it. Again, like a lot of the other 18-year-old whiskeys that we've been reviewing recently, it's got a really nice nose. It's not super pungent. It's usually pretty elegant, a little bit restrained, not necessarily like a blast in the face, right? This is kind of what I've begun to expect from some of these older core range whiskeys. Obviously, they're not super high ABV, so that might have something to do with it, but I enjoy it, but it doesn't knock my socks off. There's some interesting things here. Obviously, there's a little bit of a coastal quality to it. I didn't really mention that, but that one's definitely not even close to being, say, like a Bunnahabhain or a Bruichladdich. It's much, much lighter than that. But that's about all I can say about the nose. Why don't we get into the palate? All right, here we go. Cheers. So right away, I feel like this is a little thin. A lot of the marketing materials, I've seen people say it's rich and full body. No. For me, it really does have a fairly thin mouthfeel, especially compared to a lot of the other whiskeys that we have, that we've reviewed. Now you can chalk that up to the chill filtration, whatever you want, but I do generally get some nice flavors of that smokiness, right? You're getting a little bit of that black pepper smokiness. It's still fairly clean. It's not super dirty. More of those kind of vanillas and caramels are in there. There is kind of a spiciness throughout, and the finish is nice. I think in the back of the palate, it's there. It's not a super big crescendo. You're not getting that big like bloom of flavor in the back. It's really the peat that hits kind of right when you swallow. That stays pretty consistent, and then it dies off, and you're kind of looking for a little bit, although it does linger kind of on the back of the tongue. So finish is okay. All right, let's do a second sip, see if we can pull any other flavors out of here. All right, a little more ashiness from the peat this time. Maybe a touch of bitter. There's like this sweetness that's in here, and this is... Okay, let's start talking about it. There aren't really any super bad flavors in here or anything like that. There is kind of a sweetness that is almost... It's hard for me to describe what it is, but it's not... Talisker's not the only Diageo product that I get this out of. I don't know exactly what it is. I'm not going to try to claim it's E150A or anything like that, but I have a couple other bottles that I might be reviewing here shortly. It depends on whether I feel like putting up rant videos, because one of them, one of my favorite distilleries, the Diageo 4-range bottling of one of my all-time favorite distilleries, and it's absolute trash. It's terrible, and I'm kind of mad about it, and I'll talk about that a little bit more later. But there is this flavor right down the middle of my tongue. It's like this kind of sickly sweet, saccharine, artificial sweetness thing that I get, and it's kind of distracting. There's other really good flavors in here. The peat level I like, although I think if I want this style of peat, I'm probably just more inclined to grab an Isla, but this is doing its own special thing. There is a saltiness here, but the best way I can kind of describe this is that I think I mentioned this before, but it's kind of like the puzzle pieces are all jumbled together, or they're kind of forced together in a way that for whatever reason my brain isn't interpreting the clear picture. And this is something that I kind of had an issue with the 10 as well. But let's do one more sip. I'll see if I can pull anything else out, if there's anything else I can articulate here. I don't want to labor the point. And once I do that, like I said, I do have a sample here of the 10 that I saved from my previous bottle. We'll get everything a score. We'll just kind of talk about where this is sitting for me, and just kind of how I approach whiskeys that I don't love. I don't hate this bottle. Like I said, there is another bottle that I will maybe review. It depends on whether I want to put that kind of content on my channel. I haven't decided, but we'll see. So I don't hate this. It's not disgusting. It's just, there's something that doesn't click. So one more sip and we'll wrap this up. Cheers. See, up front, there's actually a nice toffee. And then when I swallow it, it hits the peat. And then as soon as the peat fades, right down the middle of my tongue, there's this kind of just biting, saccharine something. It's artificial sweetness, something like that. And I don't like it. And I do get that in the 10 as well. But let's just kind of wrap this up. The finish, again, is nice. That's where the oakiness comes out. There is a little bit of oaky spice here. Not much. There's a touch of saltiness, as I mentioned. There's a little bit of black pepper. And ultimately, I think, in addition to that one flavor I don't like, I try to think of metaphors sometimes to describe like what I'm experiencing if I can't really find like the specific flavors. But if you think of like a music equalizer, and you have like your highs, your mids, your bass. I'm not a music engineer, so if I say something that's woefully incorrect, I apologize. But so you have that, and you also have the levels of your different instruments, and it just feels like the levels are off. Like it feels like there's some spots where the flavor is too low, and there's some others where it's too high. And yeah, at the end of the day, to my palate, it just feels kind of like a little jumbled mess. And there's this thing that I don't like. So what are you gonna do? All right, let's talk about score real quick. So I don't hate this bottle. I don't think it's gross. Generally speaking, from a quality perspective, there's some things wrong with it in terms of being chill filtered and colored, and it's got a weird ABV and all that stuff. In the past, I've kind of done like, I would give it this if it's my personal preference, but I think people will like this, and I think that was a little bit of a mistake on my part. I think I should stick to my guns. And I don't hate this whiskey. I think it's a good whiskey. There's a lot going on. There's complexity here. It's just like I said, I feel like the levels are a little bit off. The knobs need to be a little tuned a little bit more, and maybe they're the knobs in my brain, which is fine. But the best thing I can do is give this an honest to God score for myself. And at least for right now, I'm going to give this a 5 out of 10, which is average. Doesn't mean it's bad. 5 out of 10 is reserved for good whiskey. It's just my brain is not clicking with this right now. And hopefully that changes, but let's talk about that a little bit. So there have been a couple lessons over the years that I've learned, even going back to like my craft beer days. There's a couple things that have driven me crazy about people that I've met, whether that was in these really kind of tight-knit, very judgmental communities, let's be honest, as well as kind of just throughout my life. One of those things is you will come across people who don't like something, whether it's whiskey, it's beer, it's music, it's food, it's films, it's books, whatever it is, anything that's subjective. You meet people who don't like something and seem like they're proud of it. Like, I don't eat that crap. I don't drink that swill. You know, they don't like it. So it's probably from a place of insecurity, like someone else is enjoying it. Like that was the thing that always drove me crazy in the beer groups. Someone would post a picture on a group saying, hey, I'm at the ball game drinking what they have here. We're at a family picnic. This is the beer that they have. Cheers. And someone, you know, it's a Budweiser. And someone would come and like, I can't believe you're drinking that crap. Oh, I would have drank water. And it's like, they're trying to convince the person that that they shouldn't be enjoying themselves as much as they are. And that always really rubbed me the wrong way. It's like someone's just enjoying the time with their family. They're connecting with their group of friends, people they identify with, and somebody they don't know is coming and telling them that they need to stop enjoying themselves, which is strange. So I've always tried to make it a point for me that if I don't like something, or I don't like something as much as someone else, that's totally fine. As long as they're happy and they're enjoying themselves, good for them. Yeah, there are times when you get really passionate about something where there's some philosophical issues or maybe even moral problems that you may have with a company or a product or whatever. But are you going to fix the world by going after that person and saying, stop doing that while they're enjoying themselves? Probably not. There might be a time and a place for it, but that's probably not the way to educate them. So I do try to make a point not to do that. I also have this other thing that I've really been trying to focus on in the last 6 months to a year, especially as I've kind of thought about doing this channel and how I'm going to talk about whiskey. I'm sure I probably heard it somewhere else, but whatever. And that's this idea that for every single thing that I don't like, that other people do like, whether that's whiskey, it can be music, it can be film, all those things I mentioned before, for everything that I don't like, that my life is just slightly less enriched than it would be if I did like it. We're talking about having more options, enjoying more scenarios, just more opportunity to be content, to be happy, to be fulfilled, whatever it is. Every time I have a glass of whiskey that I don't like, or a brand, whether it's a brand of whiskey I don't like, or it's a glass, or whatever it is, that's one moment in my life that I wish I would have liked it. Like, and again, this ties in, like, I'm not going to be proud of not liking something because I'm the only one that's losing by not liking it as much as other people do. And every one of us is going to have things that we don't like, no matter how much we want to. I'm very much so not a picky eater. I eat pretty much everything. It kind of depends on preparation and this and that. But in terms of just ingredients or foods that I don't like, the one that sticks out that is really kind of exemplifies this is bananas. I ate bananas when I was a kid, and one day my brain was like, you don't like bananas anymore. Well, there's been plenty of situations where I would have enjoyed myself more if I liked bananas, right? Someone's a banana split bar at work or something like that. You know, there's all these different situations where my life would have been better if I liked bananas. So I'm the one that's losing there. Now, I do have occasional whiskeys, coming back to whiskeys now, that I don't like and that I think are actually bad. You'd have to go dig in that part 5 of that Dalmore series to find one of them. And I still do not like it. Maybe I'll do a separate review of that at some point. We'll see. And again, there's another bottle that I have that if I do choose to review it, yeah, it's a little bit of rant, which kind of leads me into like a third point. I've said this before on the channel, but there's a lot of things to get angry about in this world. There's a lot of excuses to get upset about things. And whiskey really shouldn't be one of them. For as passionate as I am about whiskey, it takes a pretty good shove for me to actually like allow myself to feel kind of upset. And yeah, usually it stems from a disappointment. If it's just something I just don't like, that's fine. But I've had a couple bottles where I expected way more out of them and got way less than even the bare minimum of what I expected. So anyways, that's how I approach whiskey, to try to stay somewhat positive. And yeah, there's going to be things that don't connect with me. Maybe by the time this bottle is gone, I'll be back on this channel raving about it. That's happened multiple times. And it's kind of the danger of, hey, reviewing a bottle that is a third gone or whatever it is. Like I've had 4 or 5 pours out of here over the last couple weeks. And yeah, my experience has been fairly consistent. And I felt good enough to come on here and say, this is the experience that I am having. But with that, let's do a quick comparison with the 10 before we wrap things up. So I keep 2-ounce sample bottles of pretty much every bottle that I finish these days, and I have been doing so going back to pretty close to the beginning. I did have a bourbon infinity bottle at one point, and I stopped doing that. So pretty much everything I keep a sample of, and it's finally paying off. Because this is the bottle that I had, according to the bottle, back in 2020. When I bought this bottle, I would have told you that I was a big fan of Talisker 10. I had it years ago, a decade ago, maybe more than that. It was one of the first whiskeys that I had tasted that I actually kind of enjoyed drinking it, at least in the moment. Fast forward to me getting into whiskey. You used to be able to buy these like classic malt sample boxes where they had like 200 milliliter bottles in it. And so I picked up one of those to see if I still like Talisker. I think it might have had a Lagavulin 16 in it as well. And yep, I was like, damn, this Talisker 10 is good. So I got a full bottle of it. And by the time I got halfway through it, I had lost it. Similar to my banana situation. I liked it. And then one day I poured it and something was off. I then spent the next couple weeks probably like having the occasional pour, hoping that maybe it turned back around, and it just didn't do it. And at that time, or much earlier on in my whiskey journey, I had a much smaller collection and I was trying to keep everything on a shelf. So if I had a bottle that I didn't like, it was just taking up a spot on my shelf. So I would often say, I'm going to drink that bottle and either I'm going to learn to love it or it'll finally be gone and I can replace it with something else. So I decided to do that with the Talisker, and that was a mistake because by the time that bottle was gone, or by the time I was pouring the final 2 ounces into a sample bottle, I kind of hated it. So I don't hate it now. I've gotten over it. And in fact, I will say this, if you're still watching this and you're mad that I don't like Talisker, I did get to try a couple months ago. I did get a Talisker 25 in a bar. That's another story. I won't drag this video out any more than it is, but and I actually really enjoyed that. It was decently priced. It's like a $700 or $800 bottle. I think it was like a $40 pour, and it might have been 2 ounces or an ounce and a half or something. It was a nice pour. It's a bar that we go to here in downtown San Diego, the House of Whiskey. So if you're looking for a solid pour of Talisker 25 for a decent price, obviously it's still an expensive whiskey, but yeah, that one was really great. But let's compare the 10 to the 18 real quick, and I'll let you get on your way. So the first thing I noticed about the 10-year-old is that there's much more kind of peat character to it. It's much more of an oily rag, slightly creosote industrial thing. It's still not super dirty. It's not Kilhoman or anything like that, but you are kind of getting whiffs of this, like this industrial character. And it is definitely a little bit more, it's got a little more texture around the edges, let's say. However, I do actually find them to be fairly similar. There's definitely differences, but they're fairly subtle differences, and you can see that there's just, again, those dials, right? Some are turned this way and some are turned that way. Some are a little bit higher in the 10 and lower in the 18, and then vice versa. But let's take a quick sip of the 10. Again, pretty thin. It's not even, maybe it's not even really the texture that's so thin. There's flavors that are thin. Like there's a vanilla, but it just feels like it's diluted. Man, it's so difficult to try to convey. I'll get good at it someday. Just need some more practice. Although when they're in more negative notes, I don't want to practice that, but I guess inevitably we'll get there. And I don't hate this either. This is, again, not bad. And I think these two are actually somewhat close. Again, it's kind of difficult to justify the price on the 18, especially considering how much it costs now, because I don't think the 10 is that far off from it, at least at this point in the bottle. The 18 could change a lot as I get through the bottle, but it just feels like part of the picture's missing. And there's things that are too thin, and there's that flavor. It's not quite as sharp as in the 18, but it's there, and I don't like it. I hope I start to like this someday, because as I mentioned, even though I'm not going to probably be buying too many more bottles of Talisker 18, the 10's always a possibility, and my life will be better if I do like it, because it's just one more thing that I have an option to choose to drink and enjoy, and that's what we should all hope for. It'd be great if we loved everything, right? But if you love Talisker 18, I do apologize. Thank you for watching the entire video. And if you want to try to convince me otherwise, feel free to leave a comment. And if not, please like the video, subscribe, and I'll be back soon with another review. Thank you, everyone. Cheers.